Hello, microbiome fans. Today, we're going to proceed with our frequently asked questions and being fielded by our amazing Southwest account managers. And this recording will be available for preview later. Okay, so let's begin. The first question: why doesn't reseeding with probiotics work in the traditional sense of the 4 R's? And you can ask me to rephrase the question as well.
Can you rephrase it?
Yes. Okay. So in the initial stages of functional medicine, especially at the Functional Medicine Institute, they introduced the 4 R's of reseeding with probiotics. Since we have learned with the GIMaps studies, why is this considered old technology, that we don't reseed a microbiome? And another word for reseeding is
most of them are transient.
Yes, that's part of it. The spores that we introduce are transient. They're not meant to stay within the microbiome forever. They're there for 21 to 24 days and to move on, which is by design, so that you can't introduce an organism and have it completely take over the gut. So that, yes, that is part of it. Any other comment?
A lot of other probiotics out there don't actually constitute as a true probiotic when you look at it. Is it CDC guidelines?
Yes, in that, first of all, the majority of them never get to the gut to colonize. So the idea of reseeding is false. So yes, that is part of it. Any other comments? I would add that after 2.5 years of age, an individual's microbiome is mature and it is as unique as a fingerprint. So if an organism were to be added permanently or try to be added permanently, it would be rejected by the community that is the actual mature microbiome. Any other perspectives on this or questions? Any questions from Tara or Cindy?
Nope, none from me.
Okay.
Can you restate that answer?
Yes, the last part was that after 2.5 years of age, a child has a completely mature microbiome, and it is developed as uniquely as a person's fingerprint is. And the door of opportunity to add to that has been closed. So any organisms that the mother had inoculated, the environment had added to, that opportunity is now closed, and any other organism for permanent residency will be rejected. So what the spores do is they influence this mature microbiome by helping increase the keystone strains that are already there and decreasing the pathogens that are also transient, usually within the microbiome, or balancing them if they're not overgrowing or causing a problem. And I think you will run into a lot of practitioners that have not been updated on this. And that's why one of Kieran's most popular podcasts out there is Everything you thought you knew about probiotics is wrong. So when you start out the conversation like that, you're going to get a lot of looks and questions. I even hear from podiums of current trade shows and workshops, people talking about the 4 R's and how to go in there and reseed, repopulate, replenish a microbiome. And these are coming from very high level IFM instructors and physicians that still do not know the current science. So, you are now the evangelists of new information. And this is an important point to get across and introduce to the practitioners that are still following the old recommendations from companies that had no SHIME studies or actual in vivo information on how probiotics actually work within the GI tract. Okay, so that was kind of a long and belabored Q&A, but I think it's a very important point to get across, because you're really kind of starting off with the wrong foot if your practitioner doesn't really understand how probiotics work within the GI tract. And here, the next question, I already gave away the answer, but let's see if you remember and can calculate years to days. How many days does it take for the initial inoculum to translocate to a fully formed gut microbiome in a child? So grab your phone calculator.
Two and a half years? Or are you saying months?
Yes, it's 2.5 years. What's that in days? So that'd be
912.
Yes, exactly. So the technical average for that is going to be 835 to 912 days for a fully functioning mature microbiome. So it's 2 to 2.5 years, or 835 to 912 days. Again, we're just waking up our brains. That's why we do this first thing in the morning. Okay, thank you, Scott. Good answer. Right, number 3. Why are there no long-term benefits of non-spore probiotics?
They don't make it to the GI system
Correct.
or the large intestine.
Correct. Yes, that's part of it. Those that do will only survive for a short amount of time. They're very often not in a cell body form, as in they're probably partially digested. The research shows that those that make it and have an effect on the microbiome are limited to just influencing a particular cytokine or a particular interleukin, but it only is influenced as long as the person continues to take the probiotic. It is not a long-lasting change, and certainly not a permanent change. Okay. And number 4, why is refrigeration of probiotics, especially non-spore probiotics, not helpful?
Because your body's 98.6 degrees.
Yes. Yep. That's a good kind of it's good to point out just real obvious things that make practitioners think. So that's, I think, a very clear one. If you're saying, okay, your refrigerating these probiotics, but what happens when you introduce them to an environment that's 98.6? You know, what's the answer from the practitioner generally? The light bulb goes off and they think, well, they're probably going to die. Well, we know they're dead already, but it points out an obvious. Yes, so that's a good comeback. Anyone else have a comeback that would help explain this?
They don't make it to the gut because of the stomach pH. That's just,
Yes, so
Okay.
that's another perspective. Your refrigerated probiotics are most of the time more expensive. So what you're doing is you're asking someone to pay more for something that doesn't work in the first place. You know, so if you can't get them through logic, appeal to them through their pocketbook. Any other response? And I will take this moment as well. Sheila has joined us. Welcome, Sheila.
Hi, how are you?
Good. When you first learned that refrigerated probiotics weren't cracked up to what you thought, what was your first thought about that?
I was a little dismayed. My kids still don't believe it because when they do take probiotics that they're like, but Mom, I still sleep better. I still feel better than with not taking them. So I've had to explain things to them that there may just be metabolites feeding something in their gut from those probiotics, but it's not setting up the things they need to make their gut 100% healthy.
Exactly. And we know that there are many of these non-spore probiotics that have an effect on the gut, but it's not through live colonization. So if the manufacturer is marketing this refrigerated probiotic to deliver a live organism to the gut, then that is riddled with fallacy. Now, what we do know is, again, that some of the metabolic response of these organisms will still have an effect. And in fact, we're going to be introducing new probiotics to the market that are non-spore, but they have very specific function in the gut, two of which is going to impact sleep and stress. So know that we're not completely knocking all non-spore probiotics. We just are saying we have to research and show specific function and not just lump them all together, but to question and to introduce the science. Okay. Next question. Why is more CFU or colony forming units not helpful? And I can rephrase that if anyone needs it. Oh, we're getting some background noise. I'm not sure if you want to go ahead and mute unless you have the answer, please. Okay. I'll repeat that question. Why is more colony forming units, as in on the label CFUs, you'll see there's millions, billions, and trillions, most often in different products. Why is more not always better? Anyone have a response?
well, they don't survive going through the stomach in order to get to the intestines where they're supposed to be and to do their work.
Correct. So if they can't show that their millions, billions, or trillions can colonize in at least millions or billions in the gut, then it doesn't matter. Compared to the spore probiotics, where we show the 4 billion is delivered to the gut and 4 billion colonize. So even if they have 10 trillion or a gazillion, our 4 billion is still going to beat them every time. Any comment or follow-up question?
Are they even alive in the capsule?
Most often not. If they are, they would certainly, like Cindy said, be digested by the stomach, the bile salts, or the pancreatic enzymes. And if a few actually do make it to the intestine, then the fact that they're not part of the initial fingerprint colony will be rejected. But then, I always follow up with even the digested DNA and bacterial organism parts can have an influence if they're the right species.
Got a question on that.
Yes.
So like Sheila was talking about, right? Where even like if the probiotics are dead, they're still providing like nutrients to your gut microbiome. So if you are taking, let's say, refrigerated probiotics or whatever, right? And it all gets kind of digested and there's still dead bacteria, if you want to call it, making its way to the gut to feed the bacteria that's already there. Would that be considered a prebiotic or a postbiotic?
That's a very good question. The aspect of feeding other organisms, the digested bacteria would be a prebiotic. But there are also, DNA and say non-nutritional particles or ingredients that are getting to the microbiome that are not so much used by the bacteria, but are used in the immune system for immune modulation of interleukins and cytokines. So there are some other things that are contributing to an environment change. Now, this brings up, a question I don't have the answer to, but if you see that we're talking about digested bacteria, proteins, DNA that are impacting the microbiome, what does this mean when you genetically engineer food with foreign DNA and it gets to the microbiome? What is it doing?
Causing inflammation. It can
Yeah.
carry on the gut.
Yes, and
The
so
body
there's
doesn't recognize it.
correct. So we know there's some obvious things it's doing, but what's frightening is that they don't know all the things that may be happening. So I kind of leave that an open-ended, and just, you may get questions by practitioners that have a strong opinion about GMO foods. So it's good to have some background on what that is. If you're not familiar, GMO is genetically modified organisms where foreign DNA has genetically been added to the DNA of plants. And when those plants are digested by humans, then they affect the microbiome. That is why there are herbicides. Many of these organisms are genetically modified to resist particular herbicides, such as glyphosate. And then glyphosate is used heavily on these plants. And then we digest these plants, we get a huge dose of glyphosate in our gut, and we find that glyphosate acts like an antibiotic and negatively affects our microbiome. All right, question number 6.
What about,
Why?
what about
ahead.
BT? What about
Yes.
BT? What they
Yes,
use?
yes, also a very harmful. BT is Bacillus thuringiensis, which is an organism that has been genetically plasmids of that organism have been genetically added to corn so that it creates a toxin, and that's also ingested. And so we have to ask ourselves, does a corn plant that's had a bacterial toxin genetically engineered into it healthy for our microbiome?
I'm not sure if other people know that, but know this, that the reason why they do that is because when the corn bugs will eat it up. If you've ever tried to grow corn, they have to put something on there. So these bugs eat on the corn, they're getting that BT, they get in their body and their stomachs swell up and they just burst, they die.
Right.
And that's what I've been taught.
Yes. And that is true. And thank you. That's a great explanation. The issue there is that if corn is healthy, it has a natural immune system and the bugs won't hurt it. So what it's saying is that we are growing crops that have lost their natural resistance. And so the scientists are engineering an artificial immune system to take care of the bug problem. Okay, number 7. Oh, I don't think I did number 6. Number 6, why are acid-resistant capsules not helpful? And this is pertaining to probiotics.
Wouldn't that be just because that's only one stage of your body's defense against external bacteria? As in that you also have to deal with peptidases and digestive enzymes and your body's immune system and all of that as well for all the bacteria that's going to be going through your digestive tract?
Yes, that's a good perspective. They're trying to engineer a way to protect the non-spore bacteria to get to the intestine, and it's just acid resistant. The question would be, are they also enzyme and bile salt resistant? So that could be a breakdown in their technology. So that's a perspective. Also, it kind of goes back to the same answer like refrigeration. You're going to pay more, but you're still going to deliver organisms that once they get there will be rejected by the commensal population. But, they'll be
And that's the
rejected.
more important part of all of that, right?
Yeah, I would say that that's going to be, as far as percentage of, the impact is going to be that once they're there, they're not accepted. Now, at that point, more than likely they'll get broken down. Other organisms will feed off of them. There will be, some transient effect, perhaps on some interleukins and some immune factors. But keep in mind, you'll have to continually take that more expensive probiotic to get that small impact. Okay, and this,
So I got a question.
yes,
In that, with that sentence and what you said, so you have to continually take them. Well, with Megaspore, we're taking 1 or 2 a day. Even if they were not to take it for a period of time, that the microbiome and the commensal bacteria in the gut would be okay. And then you could come back and say maybe you missed 3 days.
Yeah.
It would
Yeah,
be
'cause-
different than acid, resistant. I call them triple encapsulated or whatever they call them.
Right.
And okay.
Yes, and that's true. And that's because the spore probiotics are actually colonizing. And so you're getting more coverage, you're getting more protection. And if you took one, or you took your 2 capsules, it didn't take anything else, you would still have colonies that are surviving from 21 to 24 days. So you're continually taking them during a protocol in order to mount a competitive exclusion of pathogens and to do all of those 32 different aspects that we know that the spores do. And then once you've received the symptom relief, now you can go on a maintenance dose of 2 to 3 capsules a week and just keep, refreshing a maintenance dose of colonization as more or less a security blanket. We're always going to be faced with some acute stress, an occasional fast food, eat something we probably, shouldn't have that might do some damage. So it's just a maintenance kind of a security or an insurance policy. And I wanted to also mention as far as the acid resistant capsule, and I said just pertaining to probiotics, and that's because we have introduced to the market a acid resistant capsule for FODMate. And that is utilizing the technology, but a completely different reason. When you're delivering enzymes, the whole point is to get them past the stomach and into the intestine so that they can do their job. But enzymes do not colonize. Enzymes, they have a different mode of action. So the acid resistant capsule is very helpful in that case. Okay, question 7, and this is going to also on the same line of thinking, busting myths of the probiotic industry. Why is rotating probiotics not helpful as they are being taught?
I think I might be able to contribute to this one.
All right.
This has a lot to do. I think this has a lot to do with the fact that these organisms come into the gut and release those antibiotics. I believe it's up to 24, and they create an environment where beneficial bacteria can thrive, and these harmful pathogens and toxins and bacteria get killed by the antibiotics and by just the presence and growth of this beneficial bacteria. So rotating probiotics isn't necessary, because when you have these standard probiotics, that's just a few specific strains. A lot of the time you'll see the lactobacillus strains. They're not doing anything particular in the gut that these spores can't do more efficiently. So you have to deal with everything that we listed earlier, like the die-off and them not getting to the gut in the first place. And then once they do, like you said, they're going to only really activate specific cytokines. So the use for rotating probiotics isn't necessary with Megaspore Biotic, just because these spores are reconditioning and not reseeding.
Very good. And to add to that, what you can focus on is, well, we know our research shows that the spores increase diversity by 40%. And so the whole point that they're trying to say is that rotating probiotics is going to increase diversity, but they have no research to demonstrate that. We do. So if you can increase the diversity by 40% just using the spores, then why go to the added expense of buying multiple probiotic products and designing a schedule to rotate them when, like Tara said, all of the pitfalls of these other probiotics are going to be there. So yes. Okay, so that's going to conclude our Q&A. Are there any follow-up questions? And then we'll just open up to our general format. So anything about what we've covered today that you have a question about? Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and close the Q&A session and shut off the recorder, and thank you all for attending.
Yeah.
Oh, Mitzi, did you have something?
Hey. Yes, sorry, I was on mute. I thought I was off mute, but I'm not. I have a question regarding bacillus overgrowth on the GIMaps, because I've had several accounts say, well, we can't take the spores because of this. I mean, isn't it I know that that's something that comes up on a lot of the GIMap tests, but can they still take the megaspore-biotic? I mean, isn't it depending on which family of bacillus overgrowth, if it is that?
Absolutely, absolutely. And what we're going to find as well, when we dig into, some of the papers that are written about GIMaps, there are some species that are very inaccurate in that technology. And that the word has been spread across their users not to use Megaspore because, amazingly, the preponderance of all of their tests come back high bacillus. So we have to question the technology when that happens.
Now, is GIMaps the one, it's not Genova, but it's the other one?
Correct. Genova is,
That
what
was
is it? Go ahead.
50%. I saw that it had like a 26%, what is it, specificity. They had a lot of false positives.
Yes,
And
exactly.
It was like really high, man. It was bad. It was bad.
That's going to be true for all PCR 16S based technologies, that their accuracy is only 30 to 50%. Good question.
So do we have any data that we can, do we have any data on that, like that we can show accounts? Because for some reason, they seem to think that the newest GIMap doesn't have those issues.
Let me follow up with that because I'm not familiar with a newer GIMap, and I think Tamra keeps a close tab on that. And I know there is a paper on at least the old whatever GIMap that they had about their accuracy. So let's follow up with Tamra and confirm that.
On that note, it's
Okay,
just
great.
something I kind of want to add when it comes into like selling with the story and the sort. I've been really trying to wrap my head around just how best to sell Biome FX. I brought it up in a couple calls and I feel like it has resonated pretty well. I was doing a lot of like reading on just whole genome sequencing in general. And whole genome sequencing is really like, it seems like I don't know if you'll know or not, but seems that it's used a lot in tracking new viruses and how they mutate. And that's really where it was more prevalently used on the whole factor of sensitivity, as in trying to find lower loads of anything that's mutated. So that way they could get ahead of the curve. And that's one of the reasonings for whole genome sequencing for being so sensitive. But then on top of that, 16S is almost like they have a list of bacteria that they're looking for, whereas whole genome sequencing is going and labeling each one. Explaining it that way to doctors, I feel has resonated and kind of made them a lot more interested. in wanting to sign up for a BiomeFX test.
Thank you for that, Scott. I think that's a good point to make, because if you're involved in virology at all, you have to, like you said, be able to track something that's constantly evolving, and there is no with PCR you have to have a standard sample and test against that, where viruses you have to keep up with that evolution, so it takes a higher level. So that's a very good point to make. Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and I will make this available for anybody that wants to review it, and we'll send it off to those members who were not able to join us.